The wind across the Arizona plains that winter carried more than dust. It carried stories of men who came west to find gold, land, or redemption. Among them was Ethan Hale, a quiet man of 35 who had built his cabin at the edge of nowhere where the mountains met the dry mesas. Folks in the nearby settlement of Dry Creek called him the man who turned down every woman. They said he'd lost someone once back east, a fiancée who died before he could marry her, and ever since then he kept his heart locked behind cold eyes and hard work. He lived alone, raising horses, mending fences, and talking to no one except his dog and the whispering wind. When the town's widows or daughters came by with baked pies or polite smiles, he'd thank them with that quiet courtesy of his and send them away. He wasn't unkind, just unreachable. One cold evening, with snow clouds crawling over the red horizon, Ethan saw something unusual, smoke rising from the canyon near his property. It wasn't from his fire pit or the trapper's camp. No, this was smaller, flickering in a hollow like someone trying to hide. He saddled his horse and rode out. The wind bit his face, the canyon echoing with the clop of hooves until he found the source. There, half-sheltered under a broken ledge, sat a woman wrapped in tattered buckskin, her long dark hair tangled by wind. Beside her lay a small boy, no more than 8, coughing softly. Ethan dismounted, his rifle slung over his shoulder but his tone cautious, gentle. "You lost?" he asked. The woman turned slowly, eyes like black embers in the fading light. "No," she said, "just cold." She was Apache, that much was clear. He'd seen her kind before, proud and silent, survivors of wars they never asked for. Ethan looked down at the child and saw fever on his face. Whatever prejudice the world had taught him about Indians, it melted under that sight. "Your boy's sick," he said. "Come with me. I got a fire." The woman hesitated, studying him as though weighing his soul. Then wordlessly she lifted the boy in her arms, and Ethan led them back through the storm. By the time they reached his cabin, night had fallen and snow had started to whisper against the windows. He gave them blankets, warmed stew over the hearth, and watched the child drift into sleep beside the fire. "You don't have to stay long," Ethan said quietly, sensing her unease. "I will leave when he wakes," she replied, her voice steady but tired. He nodded. Neither spoke for a long time. Outside the snow deepened, covering the tracks that led to his door, as though fate itself had sealed them inside. Over the next days, as the storm raged, the woman tended to her son, and Ethan found himself watching her with something he hadn't felt in years, respect, maybe even admiration. She never complained, never asked for anything, only whispered stories to her boy in a language that rolled like wind through pine needles. On the third day, when the sun broke through and painted the snow gold, the boy's fever broke. Ethan brought in wood, and when he turned, he found the woman standing near the door, her eyes calm but unreadable. "You helped us," she said softly. "Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Because no one else would." She looked at him for a long time. "Men out here help for trade. You ask nothing. You live alone. Why?" He met her gaze. "Guess I stopped believing there's something worth building with another person." She stepped closer, the faintest smile on her lips. "Then you never met someone who knows how to build with nothing but hands and will." Before Ethan could answer, her boy stirred awake, calling for his mother. She turned to him, and Ethan realized with a strange ache that he didn't want them to leave. The snow might melt tomorrow, but something had already thawed inside him. He didn't understand it yet, but he would. Because sometimes, out on the frontier, destiny comes not as a storm, but as a quiet knock at your cabin door. Spring came slow that year, as if reluctant to disturb the fragile peace in the valley. The Apache woman, her name was Nita, had stayed longer than she planned. The boy, Tavo, had grown stronger, and Ethan found himself teaching him how to feed horses and carve fence posts. What had started as kindness turned into quiet companionship. Ethan tried not to think about it, but each morning he caught himself waiting for her voice, soft and low, humming near the fire as she ground herbs or mended clothes. The loneliness that once filled the cabin had thinned out, replaced by something warm and strange. But tongues wag in every town, and soon the settlers began whispering that Ethan Hale was harboring an Indian woman. The preacher's wife called it scandal. The sheriff called it foolish. Ethan didn't care. Still, one evening when he rode into town for supplies, a ranch hand sneered, "You got yourself a squaw wife now, Hale?" The laughter that followed stung more than he'd admit. He didn't fight them, he just turned away, his jaw tight. That night, back at the cabin, Nita noticed the bruise on his knuckle. She said nothing, but later, as they sat by the fire, she finally spoke. "You don't owe me shelter," she said quietly. "You helped me when no one would. I can go." He looked at her for a long time. "And go where? To a world that wants you dead or invisible? You and the boy belong here as much as I do." She met his eyes, searching. "You say that now, but when they come with words or guns, will you still stand?" Ethan set down his cup. "I've stood alone my whole life. Standing for something, for someone, might be worth it this time." Silence settled between them, heavy but not cold. Nita leaned closer to the fire, the light catching the scar along her wrist. "In my people," she said, "a woman asks a man before she binds her life to his. Not with ceremony, but with truth. She asks, 'Do you want a wife or just shelter?' Because a wife brings storms as well as warmth." Ethan's throat tightened. "And what if I said, 'I want both, the storm and the warmth'?" She smiled faintly. "Then you might finally be a man who lives, not just survives." Outside, thunder rolled over the plains. He reached for her hand, rough against his own. That night no vows were spoken, but something ancient passed between them, trust born not of convenience but of courage. Weeks later, trouble came. A group of riders from town arrived, demanding Nita leave, claiming she had no right to stay among them. Ethan stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, calm but steady. "You want her gone," he said. "You'll have to go through me first." The men hesitated. Maybe they saw something in his eyes, maybe it was the storm building behind him, but one by one they turned their horses and left. When it was over, Nita stood in the doorway, her boy clutching her skirt. Ethan turned, breath heavy, and she said only, "Now you have answered." From that day she stayed. The cabin became a home, the land a refuge. Together they planted corn, raised horses, and rebuilt what both had lost: faith in people and in love. Years later, travelers who passed through Dry Creek spoke of the ranch up near the canyon, of a quiet man and an Apache woman who worked side by side, their laughter echoing through the fields at dusk. They said no one could tell where her fire ended and his peace began. So, if you ever find yourself on the lonely frontier of your own heart, remember Ethan and Nita's story, how love sometimes arrives not with promise, but with a question, do you want a wife or just shelter? If you enjoyed this story of courage and heart from the Old West, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. More powerful tales of love, survival, and redemption from the American frontier are coming your way. So saddle up, hit that bell icon, and ride with us into the next story.